Hey, welcome back to another episode of Suit Reminisce, the series where I talk about grown Japanese men in rubber suits beating the hell out of each other. Previously on the show, I've really only ever talked about Kamen Rider and Super Sentai. If you want to count Toku 101 as part of a Rubber Suit Reminisce thing, then I guess I talked about other stuff there, but when it comes to saying my thoughts on a particular show, I've really only covered those two franchises. So let's fix that today and talk about some Ultraman. The point that I made back in the Toku 101 video is still pretty relevant. I'm really new to Ultraman. I've only seen a couple shows, so a lot of what I can actually directly compare to is going to be a little bit more limited, but I still think that regardless, I can generally give an idea of what I had to say. And today, as you could probably tell by the title, we're going to talk about Ultraman Nexus. Ultraman Nexus is a show that I had heard a lot about when I was starting to get into Ultra. It's a show that a lot of people really seem to enjoy. It's one of those. I see it as kind of like the Gaim of Ultraman when it comes to its status in the series, at least when it comes to the Western audience. I don't really know much about how the Japanese audience tends to see Nexus, but especially on, say, Toku Twitter, you get a lot of people that really, really like Nexus, and it's very similar to me to Gaim in how it's more of a serious take on things, and it tends to deal with darker themes, and people appreciate it more for that. Personally, though, having sat through all of Nexus, I could not stand it. I am very okay with the idea of doing a serious Ultraman-style show, but Nexus really didn't ever do anything particularly interesting with it. Ultraman is inherently kind of interesting for a more mature take, because what every episode essentially is immense amounts of property damage and definitely a ton of people dying. Even before Ultraman would show up in a fight, you have the monster attacking. Even when people evacuate, you're going to have a lot of people that are going to be killed in just the monster attack. And God knows how many when Ultraman shows up and is throwing monsters through buildings. So doing a more serious kind of mature take on Ultraman is inherently interesting to me. Nexus really didn't ever deal with a lot of those issues, though, and chose to just be really boring. For the most part, when I talk about a show on here, I have seen it pretty recently. When I talked about Ninja, I had just finished it like maybe a couple days before. When I talked about Q Ranger, was just done. When I talked about Build, I basically just finished watching those episodes. I have not seen Nexus in months. I finished it a while back. I don't really remember a whole lot of it, and you might think that maybe it's stupid of me to do a video like this on a show that I can't really remember, but let me tell you that I couldn't remember Nexus 5 minutes after I finished it. I still don't really remember anybody's names. I remember Komon, was that his name? The main character. He's really the only character who I remember, his name I remember. I genuinely couldn't tell you anybody else's. I remember Faust, mostly because Faust was sort of interesting, and then they just didn't really ever do anything with her. Faust just sort of showed up, fought Nexus for a while, and then that was it. Maybe other things happened, but again, don't remember, because it didn't really ever make anything interesting enough to stick in my brain. The other characters, I do remember basic things about them. The one girl, again, whose name I don't remember, not Komon's girlfriend, but the girl that was actually part of the organization that Komon had been recruited into, is the stock I hate Ultraman character, despite not having any reason to. Like, Ultraman just showed up one day, and she was like, fuck this guy. And despite the fact that every time he showed up, he did nothing but help fight the monsters they were also fighting, she was still always like, bleh, Ultraman. I believe her reasoning was basically, he's probably an alien like them too, he's probably a monster too, so we should hate him and kill him. Not even, like, even in the leagues of similar characters like that, like, say, J. Jonah Jameson, or anybody else who hates the main character, hates the hero just for the sake of having a direct opposition like that. Even in those leagues, this character doesn't make any sense. Even J. Jonah Jameson had his own reason for disliking Spider-Man. As weird as it was, he had a reason. She really didn't ever. She was just like, well, probably also an alien, so fuck him. Another character whose name I don't remember, he's like the smart dude, and he gave orders, sort of. I remember him basically only because the shirt that he's wearing, it's always a white button-up kind of dress shirt. It's extremely wrinkled. That's all I remember about him. Yeah, that basically tells you about what Nexus was like to me. It's not a bad show. It's not poorly written, really, outside of that character whose dislike for Ultraman doesn't make any sense. It's more just really dull and forgettable. The fight scenes are pretty good. The suits are especially nice. Base Nexus, Junis, and Junis Blue are really good suits. I'm not as big on Junis Blue as I am with Junis, but it's still pretty good. And Ultraman Noah is also a fairly decent design, if a little boring. I don't think it's as good as the other two, but it is pretty good. And then Dark Zagi, the villain at the very end of the show, is also an especially great design, wasted on a pretty mediocre show. The other thing that is particularly notable about Nexus is its first opening, AU by DOA. Probably one of the best Ultraman OPs of all time. It's really, really good, and even that didn't stick around. They changed it about halfway through to a song that is basically a ripoff of AU, but isn't anywhere near as good. So I couldn't even enjoy the opening all the way through the show, because they decided, we don't need that anymore. I wanted to like Nexus a lot more than I did, mostly because of the reputation that it had. But it was such a slog to get through, and then once it finally ended and I didn't remember anything because it didn't ever really do a good job of implanting anything in my head, I just found myself unable to really like it. I'll probably give it another shot at some point, because it's entirely possible that my thoughts on it will change when I've seen a couple more Ultra shows, because it was like the third I'd ever seen. I think by the time I saw it, I had finished Max and I'd finished Orb, and that was probably it. So it's entirely possible that after I've seen a couple more, I'll go back to it. Maybe I'll enjoy it more. But right now, as of May the 31st, 2018, I'm not big on Ultraman Nexus. At least it's not Cosmos. So that's about going to do it for this video. If you enjoyed, then you can subscribe, and hopefully YouTube will tell you when I upload a new video. But when they inevitably don't, you can follow me on Twitter, because I always post when I upload a new video there. And my most recent video is always my pinned tweet. So if you want updates on videos, I'm there. My Twitter is also basically used for any random thing I talk about. I talk about things that I'm watching, things that I'm playing, things that I'm thinking. So if you care about my dumb thoughts on stuff, or you want, for some reason, sneak peeks at the videos I'm going to do, or the things I'm probably going to say in them, because I tend to tweet a lot of the same thoughts, then you can follow me there. That's linked in the description, as is my Patreon, which is currently a tip jar. So if you want to throw a couple bucks my way because you enjoy the stuff that I make, then you can, but you don't have to. And if you want to check out some of my other stuff, either because you're new or just because you're bored and want other things to watch, then on screen right now are two of my videos. On the left, you have the previous video I did, which was on the first arc of the 25 years later timeline of the Archie Sonic comics. And on the right is a video that YouTube has decided it wants you to watch. That's all for now, and I will see you guys next time.